Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are having what is this, Savvy? Our fourth episode? Are we on
This
our
is
fourth
our fourth
episode?
episode.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Round of applause. So we're having our fourth episode of KY Live. Each week, me and Savvy come to you with stuff that's getting on our nerves about the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky. Last week, we celebrated the mayor's birthday, I'm assuming, 84th birthday or something like that. We celebrated
Probably
his
90.
birthday. Wait, what?
90? Okay, 84. 84. It was 84. You're right.
we celebrated Mayor Greg Fisher's birthday by talking about all his failed policies and all the racism that is rampant in his resume. So this week we will be talking about voter rights, voter rights restoration. We'll be talking about extending the hours. We're really excited. In case this is your first time here, I am Sean Treese. I'm a lobbyist with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Louisville, and I run Black Market. And I'll let my co-host Savvy introduce himself.
So I'm a member of all that too because I support her in everything she does, but I also represent all of us in Louisville and Life Coach Each One Teach One Reentry Fellowship. And my name is Savvy Shabazz.
Yeah, so we finna get into it. Throughout the episode today, we want to hear from you about what barriers there are to voting. So we're going to be talking about a few specific things. Number one, we're going to talk about a bill that's coming up to extend the hours for voting. Right now, it's until 6 p.m. And Savvy, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it only till 5 p.m. in Paducah?
It's only to 5 p.m. in Paducah. You are correct.
All right, and a lot of people work 9 to 5s, right? They get off at 5. There's no way for them to get off in time. You have people coming from all across the city. You have our rural communities out in Kentucky that already have an issue with public transportation or transportation, period. So that's one of those. Now, let me switch over real quick. So the voting hours piece of legislation is House Bill 51, and this is sponsored by Representative Buddy Wheatley and a few others. We also have the expanded absentee voting, and that's sponsored by Representative Rachel Roberts and some others. And I think that's House Bill 72 from my notes. And then finally, we have the redistricting bill, House Bill 23. And of course, we always want to promote the restoration of voting rights. Can you tell us a little bit about where we are with restoration of voting rights from last year's election of Bashir to now?
Yes, I'll be more than glad to. So last December, I can't remember the specific date, but last December, December 2019, Governor Andy Bashir signed an executive order in Frankfort, Kentucky that restored the voting rights of over 150,000 people. I think the exact number was maybe 152,000 people for nonviolent offenders. At that time, we also knew going into it from way back in like February or March, we knew there was 300,000 people in the state of Kentucky that was disenfranchised from voting. We were really pushing for everyone to get those voting rights restored. He's really big on nonviolent offenders, so he restored the voting rights to the 150,000. That's one of the things that we're really focused on is going back Sankofa and getting everybody else to get to the polls as well. So, we got the opportunity to get 150,000 people to the polls. We did a lot of coalition building. We did a lot of organizing, a lot of mobilizing here in Louisville, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. We just came from Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Hey.
So we got to meet the organizers there. We did some work in Paducah, Kentucky as well. We got those people registered. We called people. We did phone banks. We did text banks. We did email blasts. Everything that we could possibly do to get those individuals to the polls.
And there were record numbers across the state. I also want to say all the stuff that Savvy's talking about, phone banks. We had the Paducah Power Parade. We have just parties, right, to celebrate voting. We're going to be doing that again. We're going to do it even earlier, but we need you. So those of you watching who are interested in restoring the rights of voters throughout Kentucky and empowering folks like Savvy, my co-host, who I think maybe got to vote for the first time. Am I wrong about that?
I will get to vote for the first time coming up. So at that time when he signed that, I wasn't. It didn't affect me because I was still on inactive parole. Due to over sentencing, the total of 28 years, I had to do like 14 years on inactive parole, and that would have left, and so that left me out. And I know him. I got a relationship with him, and he informed me to file for the pardon. After we all got together with some of our comrades, and we got to tweeting and tagging him into it and asking him, can Savvy vote? Why can't he vote? He's getting people to your polls and this and that. He went ahead and signed that last November the 12th. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that when those election times come up. But I'm also looking forward to going back and getting other people and showing them how to apply for pardons as well, so we can get them to the polls too.
Absolutely. So as Savvy mentioned, that piece of legislation enabled more than 100,000 Kentuckians the right to vote who have a felony in their past. And we have a lot more to get back into the fold for voting. Today's episode, we really want to talk about some of the active steps we can take. We want to talk about this piece of legislation. So Savvy, you mentioned Paducah closing at 5 p.m. Central Time. Some other places in Kentucky close at 6. Why would it matter to close a place any later or earlier when it comes to specifically the Black vote?
Well, it definitely matters a lot. Not everybody has the blessing to work 9 to 5, and that doesn't work for everybody. Some people work second shift. Second shift, if I'm correct, is from 3 to 11. So how's that going to affect them if the polls close? How does that look? So the polls close at 5 or 6 o'clock, they're not going to make it. Even if you're working like midnights, you may be asleep, getting some rest by the time those polls close. So me personally, I would like to see the polls stay open 24 hours. If our residents and our people can go to work and work those hours second shift, those polls need to be open for those hours too. If people can work from 12 to 7:30 in the morning, those polls need to be open at those times too. If you can hire people to work those hours, you can hire people to work those polls at those hours too.
Absolutely. And they have poll workers, no pun intended. They have poll workers, right? And for some people, those poll working jobs are really getting them a leg up, especially with the pandemic, to be able to get rent paid, to be able to get LG&E and all that paid. We're going to talk about LG&E in a later episode as well. But I want to get into the expanded absentee voting a little bit. That bill, it's House Bill 72. Specifically, this would allow the convenience of the voter as a reason for requesting casting an absentee ballot. So not just like you're going to be out of the country or something extreme, but allowing more people to be eligible for absentee voting. And we saw during, this era of Corona, there were so many people who needed to vote absentee. But that's pretty much always been the case. A lot of people would have had a better chance voting if they were able to vote absentee. So I just want you to talk a little bit about that, the process for this past election, voting absentee versus voting in person in the middle of a pandemic, and what that has meant.
You pretty much summed that up. We're talking about absentee voting in the middle of a pandemic. Like, who does that, right? And even just speaking to people about how that was working, I heard from several people that's involved in my organization and several friends too, that those votes didn't get counted.
Mm-hmm. Well, they found 1,000 absentee ballots thrown away in the trash behind one of the post offices.
Yes. Matter of fact, I think I found one out in the parking lot last night. I'm not sure, but I mean, from what I hear, you can find them anywhere, just laying around on the curb. But yeah, I heard that from a lot of friends. I heard it from some relatives. I even quote a local pastor that said that he had over 600 people at his church whose ballots did not get counted. This is something that we really have to look into, and it's not acceptable. Seeing people standing out in the lines, it's not a comfortable feeling. Nobody wants to do that. I even hear, even from my mom, that's the part that she didn't want to do. She's an elder. She just didn't want to stand in that line in that heat. We got to make those situations comfortable so we can get people in there. It's their right to vote. It's the right to be comfortable while doing so too.
Yeah, and there shouldn't be this many obstacles to cast your ballot. I know that for the primaries, KFTC was working the polls as we usually do, and we saw elders getting out of their car at I think it was a convention center where the only polling location was, And to walk from their car in the parking lot to the entrance, elders were falling. People with mobility issues were falling and having trouble. Like you said, it was still hot at that point during the primaries. And there's just no consideration for the distance people have to travel, for what they have to go through when they're inside. I had someone tell me that they were trying to look on their phone for a specific bill. You know, we had a few pieces of legislation we were voting on in addition to the primary candidates for Congress. And you know, they were told that they can't be on their phone while they're voting, which is not true. You know, you're allowed to look on your phone. You're not allowed to like look on somebody else's and intimidate them, but you are allowed to have your phone in the booth or have a piece of paper in the booth with notes so you can read and remember. Because those, you know, the JCPS funding piece of legislation that was up, it was long. These are not short little bills. These are pages and pages. So it makes sense to be able to have notes, but people were being told that it was illegal for them to do that. You have some folks who would show up to vote and they were told they weren't allowed to, or they needed a different form of ID than the one that they had. So these sorts of things are still happening. We talk about in history classes, you know, the way that the vote was suppressed, but those things continue today. We have redistricting issues. We have intimidation. I remember in Paducah when we were there, somebody was like, there's no voting today. We were there, what was it, the Monday before the election? And
Monday
they were
before the election.
We aren't voting today. There's no voting. It's canceled. We saw Trump flyers going around, and this is not just a Paducah thing. It's not just a Kentucky thing. This is across the country, right? We see all this misinformation coming from people you should be able to trust. And it looks like we have Gaia. Sorry if I messed your name up. The videos and interviews of all the folks who had problems voting at the convention center during the primary on the Believe in Booker page. Yes, absolutely. We saw this in the Charles Booker Heights team too. A lot of people had issues and weren't just saying it on election day, but even before election, checking to make sure their absentee ballot was received, and it was never received, right? Even applying for their absentee ballot, and then it never arrived to their home, so then they had to go vote in person because they had no choice. So yeah, I know that there were a lot of issues that we faced in Louisville, but I really want to take this to a state level. A lot of these bills that we're talking about, they're for the state. They're not just for Louisville. And I think once we start to link with all the different cities around Kentucky, we're going to have a better chance. When we talk to our folks in Hopkinsville this weekend, it was really amazing to know that they have a Black mayor. Louisville has never had a Black mayor. 50% of their city council is Black. I don't think we've ever had that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Louisville has ever had that. So people say all these other parts.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Hey,
Atonse. So, technically, Louisville does have a Black mayor in one of its second cities. So Shively just saw its first Black mayor, first Black woman mayor. But before the city merged, Louisville was a lot smaller. Yeah. So if people know Louisville, you have 264, you got 265. So Louisville was pretty much inside of 264, and majority of the city aldermen were Black. That is until the merger happened. And now you got all these other people out here, East End, Southeast, Fairdale, Okolona, all them. So yeah, at one particular point in time, we did have majority Black legislators at the city level, and then they merged, and thus this is where we at. So like that's really important too, is we're talking, because y'all also going to talk about gerrymandering, correct?
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, for those of you from outside of Louisville, it used to be Louisville, the city, and Jefferson County. They were separate. But I think when we were in college, maybe like around 03-ish, there was a merger between the city and the county. So it took the Black population from about 31% down to about 15%. So it cut our voting power in half. And as Chanel mentioned, it meant that our council folks didn't have as much power. And we've seen since Greg Fisher has been in office, you know, I got to bully him a little bit every episode, but since he's been in office, Black home ownership has declined significantly. We've seen evictions go just through the roof. And we were just reading Dr. Hollowell at Spalding, actually, let me borrow a book. He doesn't know he let me borrow it, but I still have it. And, you know, and in one of the chapters, it talks about the history of Black folks in Kentucky, and specifically in Louisville, there were more, percentage-wise, more Black homeowners right after slavery than there are now in Louisville. And that's crazy, right? Like, Black people can read legally now. We can go to college. We can be engineers and all this other stuff. But the home ownership is not reflective of that. The evictions are not reflective of that. I think it was more than 32% of the Black households were home owning households, right? So we really got to think about that. And this is related to our voting rights, because voting often, not always, but voting is often the way you get legislation passed. And because we don't have the tools to be in those conversations, like, not many of us, right? We have Attica Scott, we had Charles Booker and these people, but it's like one and two people in a sea of white. They need us in Frankfurt. They need us at the Capitol putting on that pressure. They need us at City Hall putting on that pressure. And so that's the thing that sometimes we miss. Sometimes we're on point. Like when Booker was running, I feel like everybody was hyped and they was ready to organize, ready to go to Frankfurt, ready to go everywhere, right? But we can't just do it when there's a candidate we're excited about. It's not about that one candidate. Booker is amazing, but he's one man. We have to do it year round. And I don't expect every single person to go to Frankfurt every day. You know, everybody can't be a Katura or a Savvy, be at Frankfurt all the time, lobbying and going hard, right? But we can make an effort to go. There are some people who've never been to Frankfurt. I'm talking about folks who can, who have the time, who have the resources, who know what's going on, who've never been. So I encourage everybody, that's going to be one of our calls to action for today, is to spend some time in Frankfurt. Because of COVID, you know, it's a little bit different the way we're going to interact with lobbying, but I really encourage that because that's how we get things done. That's why Governor Beshear signed that piece of legislation to give more than 100,000 people their rights to vote back. He's a nice guy, but I doubt he was going to do that on his own, you know, without pressure. I don't know. You know him better than me. What do you think?
Yeah, it took us. We've been building that bill out. Matter of fact, the bill was actually built out when Steve Beshear was in office. Yes. So when the one governor, I can't think of his name. My memory's so good, I forget things, right? But when he came in, he vetoed it. So Andy, I guess it was Andy's due diligence to pick up where his dad left off. You know, we were already supporting it and drawing it up and added to a little bit more and took a little bit away, and he just so happened to sign it. So that's what happened with that. I like to pedal back just a little bit because I keep looking up. I seen Chanel drop in. You know how like a parachuter drop in from the corner right there. So I thought that was really neat, right? I heard you mention some things about gerrymandering, right? These are some of the Jim Crow things, you know, and you say some of these things have not changed, and they haven't. These are, and one of the key words that you used was intimidation. It's intimidating for a 70-year-old to get out and it's 90 degrees and they have to walk 200 yards up to the door and wait. That's intimidating, especially for us.
Yes.
Those are some things that, those are some things we don't do. The trucks that you've seen in Paducah with the Trump's flags, that's intimidation. And we know what some of the tactics was that they use, with distancing, gerrymandering, redistricting the voting lines, even the poll tax. You know, how many bubbles does this bar of soap make? You know, how many marbles is in this bar?
You don't remember that.
And so we're just using some different tactics. You know, different tactics are being used for intimidation these days. So we got to make sure we get to the polls. We got to make sure that we get the support that we need to make sure that people are comfortable while they're there too.
And I want to say this, for anyone who watches this or you talk to anyone who is unhoused, you can vote even if you don't have an address. In some cities, you have to use the court's address. There's different ways to like get an address that is usable to vote. But just because you don't have an address does not mean you can't vote. So people who are unhoused can vote too. They have every right to. They still live in our city. They are still residents. And I'm going to pivot a little bit into House Bill 232. Some of those sponsors are Jason Nemes, Pamela Stevenson, William Lawrence, and this is about automatically restoring voter rights, right? So Savvy talked a little bit about the 100,000 plus people who got their rights restored, but we want automatic restoration. The process Savvy had to go through with getting the pardon, those sorts of things, those are barriers, and a lot of people don't have access to that, and so we want to just have automatic restoration. Before the governor signed that, were we like one of the only ones left that didn't allow people to vote, correct? It was like us in Iowa, I think. So it's like Kentucky is first on all the worst stuff. Like we're number one on all the worst stuff on education, all these different things. So I want us to be first in the best things we have to offer. And one of the best things that we have in Kentucky is voting. It actually creates change. And I really want to encourage folks that are able to join us in this. And so the bill that I mentioned, House Bill 232, is automatic restoration, which means we don't have to go through this worrying about what type of offense you had. Was it a drug offense? Was it violent, non-violent, those sorts of things? And if we're able to get this proposed constitutional amendment pushed, then it will be on the November 2022 ballot. And that's if it's by legislators. So I just want to uplift that. There's not been a lot of talk about automatic restoration. For some reason, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it depends on what type of offense, how long ago was it? Like, we just need automatic restoration because there's cops out here who are, this might be triggering to some people, but there are officers out here who are raping children. They're allowed to vote. There are officers who are brutalizing and killing Black people and being incentivizing Black death, essentially, and they're allowed to vote. So it doesn't make any sense why disenfranchised Black folks and folks of color across Kentucky aren't allowed to vote after they're done serving their time. And I know we have this left. Go ahead, Savvy.
I was just coughing. Said explore program.
Okay. I want to open it up a little bit. I know we've talked about several pieces of legislation. One thing that's really important to note is that you don't have to just pick one that you're going to champion. A lot of these different bills go hand in hand. We haven't talked about Breonna's Law yet. That's an episode coming up in the future. I know that KFTC, ACLU, a bunch of advocates and organizations have some plans for that. But it's absolutely imperative that we know about these bills before the election cycle starts. I just mentioned one piece of legislation is not going to be up until 2022, but we need to know about it now. We need to know the ins and outs of it. We need to look at what oppositional pieces of legislation are being proposed so that when it comes up, we're not blindly voting. A lot of people, for instance, heard about Marsy's Law, and they were like, yes, absolutely. We want victims to have rights. But within Marsy's Law, just like within any piece of legislation, there are other points in there. Other points that if you understood and knew about them, you wouldn't necessarily support them. I know in some states they have legislation that's like keep the community safe or, protect the community. It has that sort of language on the heading, but it gives police departments more money. It gives them more authority to just bust in your house. That's where we get policies like no-knock warrants, is when they sneak in those little racist pieces into their legislation. So the header sounds really good, like protect the children, no child left behind, those sorts of things. But within the legislation, it's actually disenfranchising folks, and it's further marginalizing communities that are already subject to historical violence. So I just want to say that, and we'll go deeper into these bills. Again, if you are joining us for the first time, I'm Chantrice. This is my co-host, Savvy. We're hosting a weekly series to talk about all the different pieces of legislation in Kentucky. And this week, we're talking about voter rights restoration. And Savvy, you've worked with, I don't know, hundreds of people maybe at this point, on not just voting rights restoration, but just educating people on the process overall. And I know you've worked with Couture a lot, who I love, one of my favorite lobbyists. What is that process like, going from not really knowing how legislation is created or laws are created to getting into really feeling like you're a lobbyist and being able to speak and advocate for other people?
It's a great feeling, and it's the work that needs to be done. I remember the first time that I took the initiative to go to Frankfort. I didn't have a clue what lobbying meant. I didn't know what these bills was. I just wanted to go, and I wanted to see. Everybody was telling me you need to go. I'm like, for what, right? So when I actually got there, just listening and seeing the way they strategize, I found something that was very important to me: building and maintaining relationships, right? We're in a position to where we can actually go into senators and state representatives' offices and sit down. That was one of the things that I established with Charles Booker. Every time I went to the Capitol, I texted him and let him know that that's where I was at. And he always invited me to his office, asked me what we were doing here, what we were talking about. And he always gave us advice of who we should talk to and who's doing this and doing that. That's the big part about building and maintaining relationships. Right. So now when I go, I see people all the time and we talk. So when I come in their office and we're talking about a bill, I think people are more prone to listen because that comfortability and that relationship has been established. that's savvy. I remember him from last year, you know, opposed to somebody just coming in. But we're also strong in numbers too. So me going in there by myself, I mean, I would rather have 100 people come in with me. You know, our strength is in numbers. So the more people that we get to come and join us, the more that we can establish those relationships and just show people the power that we have and what we really mean about trying to get these bills passed.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Thank you for all the work you're doing, because many of us are just kind of following the lead. So I want to take a moment to, again, uplift the organizations we're representing today. So I'm a lobbyist with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. I'm also part of the team at Black Lives Matter Louisville. For us, it's really important for people to get involved well before the election season comes up. I know many of the races are not happening until next year, but we got to start now because I guarantee you the people who oppose us they never stopped. They just always stay ready. We saw what happened at the Capitol recently, and although there's an inauguration and there's going to be a new president, it's still an old white dude. It's the vice president is also still the top of the country, right? While it's historic that we have a Black woman coming in as vice president, and shout out to all my AKAs. I'm very excited about the milestones that are happening, but when we get down to it, we have not put two revolutionaries in office by any means. So we still have to be vigilant in our advocacy for the people. So our call to action this week is really for folks to join some of these virtual lobbying days that are coming up. We have them through Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, through ACLU. We're going to be talking about Breonna's law soon. It's really important that we have the people, like us as lobbyists, going and saying something. They're saying us over and over. While that has power in building relationships, like Savvy said, they also need to see the average person, their constituents, to know that, yes, this needs to be changed. Like, it may not seem like it, but when we have those calls to action and you call up to the senator's office to add, like, there's 40 people on the voicemail asking for the same thing, they pay attention, right? And many of them are calling back. You as a citizen can call your representatives and get a meeting with them. It may be Zoom because of COVID, but you can get a one-on-one meeting with them. You can have your group come together, like everyone on your block, and have a meeting with Attica Scott, with Rand Paul. Rand Paul just emailed me the other day, which I'm a little worried about, but right. So like, they work for us. Chad said that the first episode, and it's stuck with me ever since. They work for us. We elected them to take care of us. And so the very least they can do is take a meeting, take a phone call, respond to an email. We have the power to create those changes. And, Black History Month is coming up. I don't want to just say a bunch of quotes and facts like people did for MLK Day yesterday. I really want us to make history. I want us to be the history that people quote in the future. And part of that comes from us taking action. So I'm going to let Savvy go ahead and talk a little bit more about some actions that his organizations have coming up, and then we'll wrap up from there.
One of the thank you for that too. I really appreciate everything that you're doing as well. When you become president, I would like to be the vice. I just want to put that in.
Stop. Pause the whole show, because y'all was trying to get me to be mayor. Now y'all talking about president. Y'all making me have gray hairs. Nah, bro. I'm good. For every Kentuckians for the Commonwealth staff member that's watching, I love my job. I don't want to be mayor, president, council person, nothing. So don't listen to Savvy. Listen to Savvy on everything except this, what he's talking about right now. Go ahead, Savvy.
Okay, so some of the things that we got coming up that we're really pushing for with the voting rights. Of course, we talked about the executive order. We talked about the 152,000 people that did get restored. Well, that leaves another 150,000 people out there too. So we're really pushing to get that bill passed, get it on the floor to where we can get everybody else automatic restoration for everyone in Kentucky. That's what we're really looking at. Another big thing that we're really looking at for this year is getting those polls in county jails. So we have a pretrial issue throughout the state. There's hundreds of people that are incarcerated in county jails awaiting sentencing. And when I say awaiting sentencing in pretrial, that means that these individuals have not been convicted. That means that these individuals are waiting to go to court. Why can't they vote? They have not lost that right. So we're trying to build relationships with as many county jailers as we can around the state. And we want somebody to pick that up and push that throughout the state to get those polls inside the jail. I don't think it's asking for much. To give people the right to vote. I mean, it's only fair. So that's one of the big things that we're really pushing for is with the pretrial and getting those voting polls inside of those jails. We're also looking at expanding the voting rights. Again, they're looking from expanding it from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock or from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. I'm looking for 24 hours.
Yes.
I don't think you can really place a time limit on when you can go vote. You should be able to go vote with what works for you.
Right.
What about the people that's working 12-hour shifts, 16 hours? When do they get to vote? And then we look at some of the employers around here that won't even I've even heard people say that they couldn't get off to go vote. That's your right. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at this year. Of course, just supporting people with a plan for the pardon, voting restoration, registration, and the big part, education. Because the more people know, the more people are going to be willing to go out, and we're going to definitely support those individuals. One of the biggest things is starting early. We started maybe August of last year. I would really like to start in March or April.
Absolutely. And the legislative session ends around that time too. So they had a week and a half. They were on for January. They're on break now. They'll be back first week of February, I believe. And so we want to use this time while they're off to really get on it. So again, I'm going to highlight the bills we talked about. House Bill 232 is voting rights. That's automatic restoration. And in case you're ready to reach out to the bill sponsors, it's Jason Neems, Pamela Stevenson, who just got in. I think that's my area, and William Lawrence. And then we talked about redistricting. That is House Bill 23. Then we have voting hours, extending those voting hours to 7 p.m. Eastern. That's House Bill 51. And the last one was we talked about expanding absentee voting. That is House Bill 72, sponsored by Representative Rachel Roberts and some other ones. And you can always look on kftc.org/bill-tracker. The KFTC bill tracker is updated for 2021. And, we've already done the majority of the research, but there's hyperlinks to the full bill so you can see the wording for yourself. But we try to break down some of those major bills that are coming up. It's really important. It's really important to do this work now and work together now, whether you agree or disagree, so that you can know what's coming up. I encourage you all to email me. My email's up there. Thank you, Chanel. Shout out Black Lives Matter, who helped make this happen. Black Lives Matter Louisville specifically. So you can reach me at chantrese.martin@kftc.org. We really enjoy doing this every week. We want to make sure that we are talking about what the people want to hear, that we're educating folks and educating ourselves on the bills that are coming up. So our call to action today is for you to reach out, either reach out to me directly, reach out to one of the senators or the House representatives that we named, and just start that process. Next week, I believe we're talking about Breonna's Law. And that is to have a statewide ban on no-knock warrants. No-knock warrants are a big part of the reason that Breonna Taylor was killed, aside from the institutional racism and police brutality and white supremacy, right? No-knock warrants allowed them to burst into her home without notification, without notice. And historically, it has been Black and people of color, Indigenous folks who are most harmed by these no-knock warrants. I believe they banned it in Virginia. Our local city government in Louisville banned it. But we want to make sure that we are banning it statewide and take this beyond. Keturah Herron, I know I've said her name like 10 times, but she has really been a big part of getting me involved, but also getting the average person involved. You don't have to have like a degree in lobbying. You don't have to be an expert in anything. You just have to live in Kentucky. That's literally the only thing you need in order to be a grassroots lobbyist. So I encourage you all to reach out. Again, kftc.org/bill-tracker. You can also hit me up, Chantrese Martin at kftc.org. And I'm going to leave it to my co-host to end us off.
We just want to take the time to just thank everybody for coming out again. Like she said, we really look forward to doing this every week and interacting with our people, educating our people, and educating ourselves as well. So make sure you continue to join us, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you all again next Tuesday.
All right. Bye, y'all.